Again, a huge welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful that you have decided to spend a few hours with me getting through this process of allowing me to show you what I do here. So let's get started. I'll set aside my hello sign. Came in handy. That was a gessoed piece. All right, so what we're going to do is, let me talk about a few things that we're going to start with. And first of all, I want to talk about a few, and I don't need my mouse now, so I'm going to set that aside. Let's talk about some of the tools we're going to use today. I asked you to bring with you 3 pieces of just plain paper, and the reason for that is we're going to do a quick exercise at the beginning. So we're going to be using that. We're going to be using Bristol paper. I'm using Bristol paper, but if you don't have Bristol paper, that's okay. Mixed media paper is okay. You can also use watercolor. And if you don't have any of those, canvas is fine too. So don't worry about it. Any one of those is going to work. So today I am going to be using the Bristol paper, and I'm going to be, when I send out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, I'm going to attach my link for all of my favorite art supplies, and this is one of the items that's on there. So let me set that aside. And I've got a variety of different brushes that I'm going to be using today, and as you could tell, these are pretty scruffed up. They're pretty old looking, and that's just the way I like them. I don't like them to be absolutely perfect. And I'm not sure about these sizes. I'm going to say there may be 2, 4, 6, or maybe even an 8 in here. And the other one I have is this one here, which is called a rigger, and that's also on my favorite art supply list. And what I love about it is that it's more of a script brush, and I'm going to show you how I use that to make marks. So that's a really fun one. This one is similar. It's not quite, the bristles are not quite as long, and that works as well too for making nice fine lines. As you know, I like to scratch into the surface, so I like to use a variety of different things. Usually when I'm working on paper, a toothpick works just fine. I've got a skewer here, or if I'm working on canvas, I really like to use a nail because it's much more sturdy. So those are a few tools we'll use today. I've got a palette knife so that I can get some paint out. And then I'll be using this one here at the very beginning when we put down gesso on our paper. So I'll show you that. And here I've got a whole variety of different mark making tools. I like to keep them all in this one basket, just because it's convenient for me and I can just dig through and get what I need. But I'll show you a few of the things that we'll be using out of here. One of them are these Stabilo pencils, or crayons, I should call them. And these are great. They're very creamy and they are water soluble. And what that means is that if I was to put down some water on it, it would move around, as opposed to non-water soluble, such as a China marker. Let me see if I can find my China marker in here. Those are non-water soluble, and they won't move around when you put water or paint or something else on top. Let's see. Well, here's a yellow one. So here's a China marker in yellow, a little short one. I'll find my other one in here too. So we're going to be using that. I love using Neocolor. I've got Neocolor 1, which is, these are not water soluble, so these are great. Let's see if I can get it open. So I've got a pack of these, but the ones that I like to use more often are the water soluble ones. And as you could tell, I do use these a lot. And I just love it when I put down marks and they kind of move around. So we'll be using that. I've got Inktense by Derwent, and these are great. Again, these are water soluble, and so when you put it down, the lines are going to kind of smear around. I may or may not be using those today. Okay, so question about the China marker. I will show you how I peeled those back. I know there's a little bit of a trick to it, so I will be showing you that when we get to that point. This here, oh, these are brand new. I didn't even open this one yet, did I? Oh, yes I did. All right, so these are pastels. They're called soft pastels. They're very chalky, and I like using them because of the vibrancy of the colors. These again are water soluble, so a little bit of water on that and they're going to move around. So I'm showing you all of these, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to use all of them. There are so many mark making tools. It can be a bit much trying to put all of them on your paper, so kind of pick and choose what you want to use. I'll just kind of set these aside over here. And let's get started with, and I'm going to set aside a couple of my China markers here. Let's see if I can find another one. It's in here somewhere. Talk about that one too. All right, not the easiest thing to find. Oh, there it is. It was, of course, at the very bottom. So there's my black one. And I've got a white one in here too. Okay, so I know there was a question about the pastels, so I'm going to try to incorporate that into my painting today so you can kind of get an idea how I'm going to do that. All right, one more question coming in. Okay, so I will kind of talk about something different that you can use. If you don't have all of these mark making tools, I'll mention some other tools that you can use. There's really such a variety out there. Oh, the other one I forgot to mention are these Prismacolor pencils. These are great. These are not water soluble, so if I put down these marks, they pretty much stay in place. They might move just a tiny bit. If you don't have Prismacolor pencils, any kind of pencil is going to work. I was using my daughter's old Crayola pencils. Those are fine too. And in terms of the Neocolor crayons, if you don't have these, just use regular crayons. That would be fine as well. Those will carry you over. I also like to use just a regular pencil throughout this process, so I'm going to get my regular pencil out here as well. Yes, I can provide you guys with a list of my favorite Nova colors. I actually have them in a photo, so there's 2 photos that I sent out, and then you can zoom in and read all the labels. So I can include that in the email that I send out tomorrow. And Deanna, if you can please send me a quick email about that so that I don't forget. Just for oh, all right. Question, I think it was about the ink tints, possibly. Oh no, you guys were asking about the Neocolor. They're Neocolor 2. And again, that's going to be in my link for my favorite art supplies, so you'll see those in there. So question about oil pastels. Oil pastels are fabulous. I've got a whole box of them. I don't have it in front of me, but I've got them here. I do not like to use them personally because they take so long to dry. So it's up to you. If you don't mind waiting sometimes weeks for it to dry completely, then go for it. I just choose not to use them for that reason. All right, so I'm going to start moving forward. Here's just a few that are not quite finished. This one is completely finished, and these 2 need mark making at the very end. But I'm going to set those aside for now. And let's get started with putting down some gesso, and then we're going to do our exercises. So I've got gesso in this bottle. I like to use the Nova Color gesso, and it comes in a giant, I ordered the big gallon size, so I like to put it into something smaller so that I can just squeeze it out onto my palette. Now we are doing, this is white gesso onto white paper, so it's going to be a little bit hard to see, but I like to squeeze some on. And then taking my spatula, I'm just going to move that around so that it covers, but I'm not worried about it being absolutely perfect. So I'm not getting every single corner, and I'm not making sure that it's entirely covering. As long as it's covering the majority of my page, then I am good with that. And so I am using Bristol paper, and that's also going to be on my favorite, it's also on my link for my favorite art supplies. All right, so I've just moved all that around. I know that's a little bit hard to see, catch some light off of that. I'm going to take the tip of this, and right away I'm going to make some marks with it. So kind of creating texture right away. All right, so questions on soft pastels and oil pigment sticks. Yes, you are welcome to use those. And I've got some soft pastels here so I can show you how I use those. I'm going to also take my toothpick, and a toothpick just kind of makes finer lines. So I'm going to make some lines throughout here. And then what I like to do, because I don't like a continuous line, you kind of see those lines there, I'm going to just push back a bit and just obliterate some of the lines, like that. All right, so if you don't have gesso with you today, that's okay. What we can do, if you've got like a matte medium, that would work. If you've got a gloss medium, that would work. But for today, you know, we're just going to play around, so I wouldn't even worry about it. If you don't have gesso, don't worry about this first layer. What gesso does is it creates a nice barrier between your paper, which is a very porous surface, so that when your paint goes on, it goes on top of the paper as opposed to seeping into the paper. It also is going to keep your paper flat. So you can tell these ones that I have are, you know, relatively flat. They might curve up just a tiny bit on the edges, but barely. So I use it to make sure that my paper stays flat while I'm creating, and then afterwards as well. And if it doesn't, sometimes I'll just put something heavy over it overnight, and that'll flatten it out. So again, if you don't have the gesso, don't worry about it. Okay, so questions came in. All right, so the gesso goes on the Bristol paper. I'm using Bristol paper because I love Bristol paper. It's a very flat, smooth surface. Even though I like a lot of texture, I like to build up my own texture. With watercolor paper, it kind of tends to be kind of rough, and it's got these kinds of ins and outs. And mixed media paper is great too, and I've got a bunch of it here, but this comes in these pads and I love to use it. So that's probably the primary reason I like to use the Bristol. So hopefully I answered all the questions about the Bristol. Black gesso is okay as well if you want to use that. Just know that your whole page is going to be very dark when we get started, but that's okay because putting down black is part of my process as well. Okay, so this is not our exercise yet. This was just to get our paper primed and get it ready. We're going to set this aside so it dries, and then we're going to do our exercise. So I'm just going to set this over here to the side, and I'm going to bring in my paper. All right, so I've got 3 sheets of paper here, and what I wanted to do is just help you guys to loosen up. So much madness going on in the world today. I know we can get really tense, and when we sit down to do our artwork, we're still feeling a bit tense. So I wanted to do these exercises to help you loosen up. And I do these all the time. This is how I start all of my paintings, is with mark making. And so these exercises are going to help you to be able to know, what kind of things that you can do to loosen up. So I'm using a regular number 2 pencil. You can use a colored pencil, whatever you want to use, whatever you have on hand. And I'm using it in my right hand, which is my dominant hand, and I'm going to just make some marks. I'm just going to make marks like this, just not even thinking, just being really loose. So give that a try. Just really loosen up and you're just scribbling in essence. Now, another way to loosen up, if that's not enough for you, is switch to your non-dominant hand so that you have less control. Hold it more towards the end of your pencil. So don't hold it like you're going to write something, but rather just really loose at the tip. And then the other thing I want you to do is I want you to look around the room. You can be looking out your window if you've got a window nearby, or just look around your room. And you're not going to try to draw anything specific that you see, but rather look at lines and shapes. So I'm looking around, I'm in my garage studio, so there's water heaters in front of me. So, you know, I'm just going to draw some lines. Then I've got some shelving over here coming out at an angle, and I've got a bunch of paints lined up, and I'm not trying to draw any one of them, I'm just looking at the lines. I've got some boxes stacked up over here. All right, so I'll move that up a little bit closer. Okay, so now you can see all these different loose lines, and I'm not looking at it, as opposed to when I was actually looking at it, it looks a little bit different. So this tends to be a bit more organic and loose. And then the last exercise being that you can go back to doing this, but grab a variety of different mark making tools. So I can do some like this, and then I'm going to switch, still using my non-dominant hand, maybe some pink in there, and I'm going to grab one of my Stabilo woodies, making a darker line. I'm pressing in a little bit darker now. So I'm doing a variety of different lines and just trying to stay loose with that. So that's one way to loosen up. And these, I like doing these on paper because it's just paper and you don't have to worry about it. All right, now hang on for one sec. Deanna, I muted over here because you're giving me feedback in my ear. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and set those aside now, and let's go back to our gessoed piece. And it should be somewhat dry depending on what climate you live in. Mine is still a bit wet. Yes. So let's see. I'm going to... Okay, so the fat crayon I talked about, this is a Stabilo Woody. And I'll have that in my favorite art supplies. So they're called Stabilo Woody. Okay, so if your page is not completely dry, one thing I requested if you wanted to include in your list today is I've got a heating tool. This one is also on my favorite art supply list. It's by Ranger, and I'm going to dry this really quick before we continue. You can also use a hair dryer. That's good. All right, so that is good enough for now. Now I'm really dry. I love those heating tools because they produce a whole lot of heat and they're not too noisy. Okay, so based on what we just did with our exercise, we're going to do that again, doing it directly onto our gessoed page. So I'm going to start with my pencil, and I'm just going to make some marks really loose. I'm going to switch over to doing some colored ones. So here's a woody again. Switch to my non-dominant hand. And let's get Let's see, what else do I have here? This is a Prismacolor pencil. That's a nice bright yellow. All right, and let's switch over to, I'm going to grab another, well, you know what I'll do is I'm going to grab this. This is DeWert. These are the ink tints. Oh, that one's not very bright. Let me get a brighter one. How about a green one? Kind of see this one. All right, and I'm going to put down, how about some red, how about a pink? Let's get a warm color in here. Okay. Okay, so there we go. We just got started and put down a bunch of different marks. I don't have white ink on my paper, so I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, okay, so if you just started watching, I already put down a layer of gesso on my paper. So you can, on the recording, you'll be able to watch it from the beginning. All right, so we've just put down a whole bunch of marks, and that's how we're going to get started. Now, the other thing I've got with me is my water. I've got a spray bottle with water in it as well. I've got my hand lotion, which I like to put on before I get started because it keeps the paint from sticking to my hands. And when I go to wash my hands, it comes off so much more easily. So a little bit of that. And the next step I like to do in this process is I like to put down black. If you don't like black, you can also put down some Payne's Gray. So I've got Carbon Black and Payne's Gray, and these are, and I'll hold those up so that you can see the numbers on them. So Carbon Black is number 109, and Payne's Gray is 140, if you're interested in that. All right, so today I'm going to go with the Carbon Black, which is one of the favorites that I like. Whoop, let me get something to open this up with. And I like to put down a lot of black in the beginning so that in the end I can pick and choose how much black I want showing through. So let's just move that out of the way. And I'm going to grab one of my a little bit larger brushes here, and I'm going to just dip directly in, and I'm going to start putting some down. So again, I like to put a lot of it. If you already use black gesso, then you certainly don't need to do this step. Instead, you may want to, if you put down black gesso, you may choose to put down some white gesso on top of your black to give it some of these lines like this. Okay. All right, and then you can take your toothpick and scratch into that right away. And that creates, start building up some texture that way. All right, so I'm going to close this up. And let's move on to the next step. Mars Black is great as well. Any black you've got on hand is great. And now I'm just, okay. And yes, my process is the same whether I'm painting small or large. I go through these same steps. So I just wiped this off, and I'm going to put down, I like to put down a row of white, so hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to just take what's on my brush and kind of create a gray. And I'm going to start making some marks right away. So I'm making different marks and just kind of using up what I have on there. I can make some. If you're using heavy body paints, you can water it down a bit. That would be fine. Don't put too much water in it. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of use up what I had on my brush by creating some gray, and I'm just going to now wash that off so that we can move on. I'm going to wipe that down a bit. All right, so far we've just got a little bit of mark making. Now, if you guys have been following me for a while, or if you watched my Paint with Betty session in January, thank you for being there in January and for coming back again. You guys know that I am inspired by fields of flowers, and more specifically, you know, it's the lines in the fields of flowers that I'm seeing. So I'm always looking at lines. I'm always noticing lines when I'm, you know, walking around in the neighborhood. I was going to say driving, but these days I haven't been driving all that much, probably like a lot of you guys. So I've been doing walks around my neighborhood, and I'm always looking at lines, noticing different lines, especially when it comes to flowers or trees. I'm always noticing the shapes of the lines. And so that's when I'm creating, I'm also thinking about those shapes and those lines. So for yourself, think about what inspires you. Think about what makes you happy. When you're out and about, what are you noticing that really sings to your heart, or just you just look at something and that just really makes you happy, and then think about, well, what is it about that makes you happy, that you can be delivering into your paintings, that you can start expressing through your artwork. And for me, to be honest, I didn't start noticing those things until I really started asking those questions a lot deeper, and noticing what I was noticing, if that makes sense. So paying attention. Today, I'm going to be showing you a number of different techniques. I'm going to be showing you how I create, but I would love it if you could take some of these techniques and you can incorporate them into your own painting, but into your own style, something that's coming from within you, and giving you an opportunity to express yourself through your artwork. So lines, we're going to be doing lots of lines today. So let's move on to the next step, and that is, let's go into picking colors. So when I'm creating, I like to work with either warm colors or cool colors at the beginning, especially the first couple of layers. So your warm colors being your reds, your pinks, yellow falls into that category, but yellow will also fall into the cool color category for me. Let's see, I've got one more here. So I've got Quinacridone Red, which is number 129. I've got Fluorescent Magenta, which is number 190. And then I've also got Cadmium Red Medium, which is number 125. So we're going to be using these three reds. So let me put those out. And then we're also going to use Cadmium Yellow Medium, number 102. All right, I've got a question coming in. Okay, so the question is about wanting to understand my composition and what is my thought process in that. So I will be sharing that as I go. My corners do tend to be a bit blank or quiet. Those are the quieter areas. All right, so I'm taking out paint, and as you can see, it doesn't take a whole lot. So I'm using just a little bit. I'm going to put that out here on my palette. And I'm going to double dip, go right into my red, put out some red. And I'm not going to double dip one more time, so let me just offload that. And some of my pink here. All right, I'm going to wipe that down, and I'm going to grab some yellow. And just a little bit of yellow. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit more of yellow, because yellow I'm going to use in both the warm and the cool colors. All right, so let's put lids back on these and set those aside. All right. Okay, so we've got these colors, plus I've got my yellow here. I'm going to just move things over a little bit. Now I'm going to grab a smaller brush. I've got another question coming in. All right, so I am using acrylic paints today. I am not able to type up the colors, but I will write them down at the end and I will include them in the email tomorrow, but I can't do that at this moment. Okay, all right. All right, so, okay, so I'm using Nova Color paints. This is what their jars look like. These are the small 4-ounce jars. Those are more like my travel size. I bought a whole bunch of these for traveling. Then for the studio, I like using the pint. A little bit larger. Oh, and Indian yellow. I want to add some Indian yellow too. It's a good thing you guys asked me that question. There we go. All right, this is Indian yellow number 106. All right, so pint, and then there's also quart size, which is much bigger, that I like to use in the studio. I don't have one here in this studio. I've got it in my other studio. Yeah, so the Indian yellow is not quite the same as yellow ochre, but if that's all you have on hand, that's perfect too. What you can do if you like the Nova Color paints, you want to give them a try, just go to novacolor.com and ask them to send you this color chart. It's free and they'll put one in the mail to you, and these are the actual paint colors on here. They put little dabs of it so that you can see the true color, which works so much better than looking at it on your computer screen. So go ahead and message them and they'll send that to you. Okay, let's get started here. I've got a little bit of yellow on my brush already because I just grabbed some out of the jar. So I'm going to start with some yellow. I like mixing my colors as I go and adding white to it. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make marks again. So similar to the marks I made before. Let's get some pink going here. So the question is, when I'm not teaching and I'm just working, do I work on multiple pieces or do I use my handy dandy dryer to speed up the process and get through it? The answer is both. Sometimes I will work on multiple pieces, but other times I like to just work on one piece and work on it from start to finish. Okay, so I'm doing a variety of different marks. So I've got some smaller ones, I've got some medium-sized ones, I've got some circles, I've got this red in kind of these larger marks. So I like to add a variety of different marks. Let's get this Quinacridone Red in here too, that's really pretty. Let's see, maybe I'll just do a bunch of little marks with that one. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get down as many marks as possible so that as I start to go to my next layer, I have a lot more to choose from in terms of what I want to cover up and what I want to keep. So for me, the key is making all kinds of marks on top of each other. And this stage is going to feel very chaotic. It's not going to make any sense. And that's okay. It's the beginning stages, and I don't do a whole lot of thinking here. I can actually talk to you guys and paint. So that tells you really very little thinking is happening on the painting part. So the question that I just got, is it okay to dip your brush into all the different colors? Yes, that's because we're working with all warm colors for this very first layer. So when you're working with warm colors, you're not going to create mud because these are all in the same color family. If I was to bring in green and mix it with the red, I'm going to get a nice brown, or what we like to call mud. So this is why I like to work with just warm colors first and then cool colors, or sometimes I start with cool colors first. Depends on my mood. So yes, Feel free to dip back and forth. It starts to create harmony between these colors. All right, let's put down some more marks. Get some sideway marks here. Sweet. All right, so let's see. Question is, am I adding white to all my colors? I add white constantly, almost all the time. Sometimes maybe I'll skip and I won't add some more white, but this is why I like to put out a line of white, because I can continuously dip into that line. Ooh, there's a nice orange. All right, so one person is getting mud because their black didn't dry. You want to make sure that your black is dry, or you want to avoid the black if possible. Mine dried because I put on a really thin layer of it. I put it on and I kind of spread it out so that it was really thin and it dried very quickly. Sometimes when it's not dry, I just kind of avoid those areas until I can see that it's dry. And then my sister had a second question for me, and now I already forgot what it was, so she's going to tell me again in my ear here. Okay, so the other question was about my shapes being very random looking, and do I plan ahead? They are random, and I do not plan ahead. I have no plans, no idea where I'm going with this, what it's going to look like. I'm just putting down marks, and let's see where it takes me. All right, so I've got quite a bit going on here, maybe a few more here and there. And I'm going to call this done. I've used up most of my colors here. Another indicator that I'm done. Let me just finish it up here. Okay, so that's how crazy and random my first layers tend to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this brush, because we're going to switch over to the cool colors. So let's talk about cool colors. Your blues and your greens and your purples are your cool colors. Let's see, I've got a variety of them here. So I want to make sure that I set aside the ones that we're going to be using. So let's go with, I just picked a few. I've got Phthalo Blue back here, and I have Cerulean Blue Hue. Let's go with the Cerulean because I can't pronounce it, so let's just go with that one. That's number 127, so that's a really pretty blue. This is Medium Violet 186. I've got this Yellow Green, which is number 120. And then I've got my favorite, Phthalo Turquoise, number 135. So I'm going to put those colors out, and I'm actually going to, let's see, let me push back a few things here, and I'm going to put them out over on the side so that I can leave my warm colors up front. So let's get these opened up. All right, and okay, so this first one is the Cerulean Blue Hue. Again, we don't need a whole lot of paint. I'm just putting a little bit out. Set that aside. Let's go with the, sometimes I can just take it off my cap. That's how little I need. And some green. All right, we got more questions coming in. Yes, you want to dry between warm and cool layers so that you don't create mud. So because I put down so little paint, I can see that most of mine is already dry. Oops, I got way too much purple there. Oh, that's okay, we'll leave it out. The paints on my palette It depends. Summertime they'll dry out a bit faster. Wintertime not as much. I've got the heater on in here today, so these are almost completely dry. But I don't like to use any extenders because extenders mean it's going to take longer for it to dry once it's on here. So I tend to just not put out as much, put out what I'm going to be using, and that way I don't feel like I'm wasting any of it. So here, most of this is dry. There's just a few areas that are not quite so dry. So I'm just going to do this, dry the rest of it. I can also hit it with the heating tool, but you can tell looking at my hand that the majority of that was already dry. All right, more questions coming in. That purple diazoxy, or however you pronounce it, I guess the question is it a warm or a cool color? I don't know if it's a warm or a cool color. Other than it belongs, I would treat it like it's on the cool side. Colors that, a green can also be a warm green and a cool green, but when we just break them out into general categories, we're looking at the reds, the pinks, the oranges being in the warm side, and the blues, the purples, and the greens on the cool side. But each color individually can also have a cool and a warm tone to it. But we're not going to go into that level of understanding of colors today. We're just going to separate them in the general categories. All right, and colors to be repeated. I will do that real quick because I will type them up and have them in the email tomorrow. So Cerulean Blue Hue, number 127, Phthalo Turquoise, 135, Medium Violet, 186, and Yellow Green, 120. All right, so I'm grabbing some white over here, and here's my blue. Oh, such a pretty blue. And I'm making marks again right on top of what I've got. Go ahead. Question is about my Bristol paper. Yes, my Bristol paper is curving just a little bit, but I think that's because I put such a thin layer of gesso on it. It'll flatten out as I add more paint layers to it, so I'm not worried about that, or I'll just put it under something heavy. Okay, so is there another question? Okay, no other questions right now, so let me talk a little bit. So now I'm going to already start thinking a little bit about composition. I'm thinking about larger elements versus smaller elements. Where is my eye going to go the most? Kind of creating a focal point. So I kind of automatically drew these out. So those are already feeling like a focal. I can drew another one maybe up in here, but too close in shape to that one, so I don't like that. I want it maybe bigger. I don't want the shapes to be all the same size. So I've got these shapes going through here. Maybe I'll use them, maybe I won't, but I'll put them in for now. Going through my purple now, and I am mixing these colors as I go, so adding some blue to my purple. All right, let's just come in here. That's a pretty color. I'm going to add some white to that. So again, thinking about lines, making different lines. I like stems. I like old fences. So sometimes these represent old fences. And let's switch over to the rigger. Oh, and how about we scratch into what we've got too? See, sometimes I start talking too much and I don't get around to scratching into the surface. So doing a little bit of more scratching in to create texture. All right, so I'm going to grab my rigger here, which is this brush with the very long bristles on it. And it's really important that this is very wet. If it's too dry, you're not going to be able to get it to move around. So I like to make sure that it's nice and wet, and I'm just going to put it into one of my colors here. That's probably not the best color. You guys can't see what I'm doing there. Let me grab some white. I think white's going to be better. All right, so see how nice it makes these nice lines. I think you guys can see those now. And when I'm making the larger ones, I like to make kind of a half circle on one side and then finish it up on the other side, as opposed to trying to make a circle all the way around, which doesn't always work for me. Although it makes odd shapes, so that's a good thing. So that's one way to use your rigger. I also like to use it to make dots. Let me do that in a dark area so you guys can see it. So it makes great dots. Sometimes you might have to wet your brush just a little bit. So you can make a whole bunch of dots with it. You can make lines with it. So just pressing down hard. I'm sure I'm not using it properly when I do stuff like this, but don't be afraid to use your tools in any which way you want. Experiment with them. See what works, what feels good. So I'm really pressing down hard to make thicker lines here. So that's another way that you can do that. And then another thing I like to do, I tend to do this more towards the end, is I like to treat it like a brush, and I just kind of like paint with it using the side of it. And what happens is it kind of skips around and doesn't quite cover everything, so it allows other colors to pop through and show. So I really like doing that. All right, so what I'm mixing with the white is just these colors over on the side. There was a question about what I mixed with my white. So just whatever I had on my brush, added a little bit of color to it. All right, let me do a little bit more with the rigger, just making some smaller lines. So again, I'm still in that kind of stage of just building up as much interest as I can by putting in a lot of layers so that I can decide later, what do I want to cover up, what do I want to keep. So let's do a little bit more down here maybe. Okay. And let's see, a little bit thicker lines. Okay, so done with the rigger for now. Let me wash out, don't really need to wash it out, but okay, so going back to where we're at here. All right, so the question is, how did I decide when to change colors? I kind of decided because I was running out of my colors, and also because I felt like I had enough of that color on that first layer. So here we've put in our second layer. So our first layer being our warm colors, we did those, and now our second layer being our cool colors. So we've got those put in here too. So now's the time to kind of start making some decisions about, you know, the third, the fourth layer. Do you want it to be more on the warm side, warm colors? Let me see if I can grab some of my other ones that are done here. So for example, this one, you can see the brighter colors were probably, those are more my first layer. So I finished this off with more of the cool colors, the blues, the purples, the greens, with the pinks and the brighter colors popping through. On this one, same thing. I decided to go with the cool colors, probably more noticeable here than this one. So more of the blues in this one and the greens, and the reds were my first layers, and the pinks that are popping through. And then again, same thing here. I don't have an example of the reverse for you today, where I would have the warm colors being on the final layer. So again, these were my earlier layers, the pinks and the oranges, and then I finished it off with the blues. These I created when I was in Puerto Vallarta, so I think I had a lot of influence of the mosaics that were all around us while we were there, the beautiful blue skies. So today I need to make a decision now, you know, which way do I want to go? At this point I start to think about, okay, do I want to go with mostly blues or the cool colors or the warm colors? Okay, so I'm listening to questions in my ear. So the first question, I'm sorry, Deanna, say the first question again. Oh, gesso. Okay, so I'm using gesso because I like using gesso as my white. I use so much of it that I just prefer to use it. It's not quite as opaque as white. I do own a jar of titanium white, which I hardly ever crack open. I just prefer the gesso. And then the second question, Deanna? Okay, so the other question was gauging when this layer is good enough, and I think, you know what? Let me see. I think that person needs to ask the question again. Tammy, can you elaborate on that, please? Because I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to answer your question properly. Okay, and I do not use stencils. I used to use stencils in my mixed media days, but I do not do that anymore. Okay, I'm going to dry this layer. So let me hit this real quick. Okay, Tammy, let me answer that for you. All right, so Tammy's asking, how do I know if I added too much or too little to a layer? I really don't know. It's just a matter of, you know, what feels comfortable to me, matter of practice. You know, I think this is enough for now. I'm ready to move on to my next layer. And I think I want to go back to my pinks or my warm colors. Even though I've got some of my cool colors still here, I think I would like to... actually, you know what? I'm going to add a little bit more of these cool colors. So let me come in here and let me just add a little bit more, because I think I want to finish this one with the warmer colors. And looking at it, I feel like I don't have enough of these cool colors on it to be able to have them pop through. So let me just add a little bit. Yes, please. Okay, so question is if at this point my entire base is covered with paint. Not entirely. You can still see some of my original gessoed page showing through, so it's not entirely covered. All right, so there. Okay, and the other question coming in is how often do I change my brush? And sometimes the answer is not enough. I try to get in a variety of brushes between my script and these other ones, but sometimes I forget to change them out. I really like this size, and I don't know what size it is because the handle has completely chipped away and covered in paint. I want to say it's maybe a 2 or a 4, which is appropriate size when you're working this small. All right. Do I use my fingers when I paint? Rarely. On occasion, I might. Okay, so let's go with, you know what, I'm going to add just a touch of green. Oh, I know what's missing over here. My yellow. I like to mix yellow with my cools and my warms, and I totally forgot to put that out. So let's put a little bit of that out. And a little bit of the Indian yellow too. Which makes this lovely green. See, I knew I was missing something. So you know that when you mix your blue and your yellow, that you get a fabulous, can you guys see that green I'm making? Isn't that pretty? That's what I was missing here. Okay, so the issue is that because I've got a white desktop here so that you can see my colors, you can't see the edges of my page. So I'm not painting all the way to the edge just yet, but I will be soon. Okay, so mixing in, isn't that another pretty green? All right, I feel like I have to start all over now that I got my nice greens out. I'm just going to add a little bit more here. And again, it's looking very chaotic, right? Hang in there. It's going to look super crazy before it starts to look like anything is making sense. All right, I'm just going to put a few more. Okay, we'll call that good. Let me hit that with the heating tool so that we can move on. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Oh, interesting. My sister tells me that the fan cuts out after I get started with it, so that I guess so you guys don't have to listen to me, or listen to the fan going. All right, so I'm putting out the Indian yellow again, and let's put out some of this wonderful pink. This is the Fluorescent Magenta, which is 190. The Indian, yep. Oh, when do I think about turning a painting into a waterscape? I don't think I do, so I usually go with an abstract field of flowers, so it would be very rare for me to do a something other than that. But there was a time when I was doing abstract landscapes, but very different from what I do now. All right. If you don't have Indian yellow, just go with any yellow you have. You know, sometimes I don't use Indian yellow. So you can use, I've got Cadmium Yellow Medium, you know, any yellow is gonna work. You can add a little bit of orange to that yellow to make it more like an Indian yellow. Okay, so I have laid out my colors again, and I'm going to switch out brushes. I'm going to use this one. It's not quite a script brush, but kind of close. And let's start putting down some color again. I might need to put out some more white. Okay, so now I want to start thinking about filling in now. And as I start filling in, like I'm going to fill in this corner. So my corners tend to be my quieter areas. So I'm going to start thinking about, okay, what areas do I want to be a quiet area? You know, for example, in this one, this lower area is nice and quiet. I've got a little bit of quiet going on here, a little bit over here. Sometimes I might have a quiet area in the middle, but it tends to be mostly on my edges. So I like to work, usually from my edges, working inward tends to be the easiest place for me to get started. So let's add some, I'm going to work through here. Now this time I'm kind of keeping some of the colors from my first layers. And my page is warping a lot more than usual, so it's kind of tilting back and forth. But that's okay, that will flatten out. Okay, so see how I saved some of those areas there? I didn't cover everything. I kept some of the blues and the yellows. Now, will that be in the final? I don't know, but for now I'm going to save it, so to speak. All right, let's move on to this Quinacridone Red. Makes such a pretty color. All right, let's move on to, so I've got pink going on here, yellow. I'm going to kind of move to the middle now. So I've got these blues. I'm thinking, oh, I kind of like those blues. You know, I don't like this brush anymore. I'm going to switch it out. I like my flatter brush. Let me switch, wash the cool colors off of that. Let's go back in here. All right, this one I like better. So I'm kind of saving some of these blues because I like them. It's all a matter of, you know, what do I like, what do I don't like, what seems like something I would want to save for now, maybe not forever. Maybe it'll get covered up in the next layer. But for now I'm kind of liking it, so I'm saving it. Let's go to yellow. I'm going to mix in some yellow with this color. So I don't like to keep using the same color. I'll always dip my brush into one of the other colors to create a new color. So this is kind of more of an orange. Another question. Okay, so what do I like about the flatter brush? It covers more of an area. The script brush is too fine of an area. It comes to a point where this stays flat and I can cover more areas. Okay, and this is what it looks like. I know that's hard to see. Let's see. I know. How about on my phone? There. It's a very small brush. So when you go to the store and you're buying brushes or online, there's flat brushes, there's filberts, there's round. I would suggest that you try all of them and figure out what you like best. Everyone's got their own thing that they like. Okay, so how do I hold my brush? I hold it very loosely, kind of like in our exercises, where I'm not holding it down here because I'm not writing, and I'm not doing fine art where I'm trying to make a vase, a perfect vase or a perfect flower. So I tend to hold it back further, and I'm very loose, and I'm not putting down a whole lot of paint. I've got paint on my brush, but I keep that not overly loaded so that I can see some of the other colors showing through. So the question is, how do I prevent my painting from looking all blocky? I think one way to do that is to not put down too much paint. I'm dipping into red right now, and I'm going to show you what I think. Who's asking that question? Jennifer. So to answer your question, Jennifer, I'm hoping that this is correct. So if I put down a lot of color in a solid way, that's going to look more blocky. Whereas if I come in and I am just kind of scribbling in, I don't know how to explain that. It's more of a scribbling. I want to be able, I don't know if you guys could hear it, but you should be able, I'm going to be quiet for a moment so that you can hear the way it sounds. I'm not sure if you could hear that. It's kind of a scruffing sound, and that's me just kind of not putting down a lot of paint, because by not putting down a lot of paint, you're going to get that kind of scruffing sound of you working on the paper. Okay, Jennifer. So it sounds like you figured out that you're putting down too much paint. You want to keep your brush with, see how I'm putting these marks on the side here? You want it somewhere in this range over here. You don't want it this thick, loaded up with paint. You want it a lot thinner. So the way I do that is by, when I load it up, I'm putting it on very lightly, and then as I start offloading that paint, then I start pressing down a little bit harder. Okay, so why am I not using this brush? I probably could. It's not too big. This one's bigger. I like the smaller brush because I feel like I have more control over the size of the shapes. So I can, if I want a larger shape, I can certainly make it a bit larger. But with this brush, once I put down that mark, let's do that. All right, now I'm committed to making these bigger marks, and so I can't really control the size of them. So I prefer to use a smaller brush. Sometimes in the beginning I will use one, that's larger like this. And that brings me to remember to tell you guys about getting your spray bottle. If you've got a spray bottle on hand, let me show you how I like to make drips. So let's do drips with the let's do them, I'd rather do them with a darker color. There's a question coming in while I get ready to do that. Okay, yellow and pink are not covering. It could be because your colors are transparent. Add some white to them so that they're more opaque. And not all of my colors, some of my colors are transparent. Like, for example, this is the Indian yellow that I'm dipping into. See, that's a very transparent color. As opposed to if I was to take this blue, and that's a very opaque color. So some of your colors might be opaque and some of them may be transparent. And I just add some color to it. So maybe adding some white to it, or adding some another similar color to it to make it more opaque. Okay, I put some black on my brush. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to do black drips. You can do drips in any color you want. You can do white, you can do pink, you can do red, you can do green and blue. I'm choosing to do black so that you guys could see it on here. And I'm actually going to gray it out a bit. So I'm adding a little bit of white. And what I do is I just put a line of it at the top where I want the drip to be. And I'm just going to go across here too. And hopefully I can do this so you guys can see it. So I'm going to take my spray bottle. I'm going to hold it fairly close. And I'm going to give it a few good squirts. You don't want to hold it way back here because then you're just going to spread all that paint around. You want it really close to it. Put back over it. Okay. All right, so you guys can see my drips there. I love drips. I love drips because I love the lines that they make, and I love that there's no controlling them. So I'm going to hit this with the dryer, and then I'm going to answer a question. So let me do that real quick. Okay. Okay. Okay, I am back. So it's pretty much dry, maybe not entirely, but that's okay. All right, so there was a question about opaque and transparent. So this cadmium red medium is opaque. So again, it's going to cover really well. Hopefully you can see that red on the side there. And then I've got, we'll just put that on the page. There's my finger painting. And then I've got the Quinacridone Red, which is right here. And this is a transparent one. So you can see that it kind of shows through. It doesn't cover as well. And there's one more. Let's see, transparent, opaque. Oh, I may not have one here. They actually offer... Okay, I don't have, all I have today is transparent and opaque. There's actually one more, and let me see if I can find what that one is. Opaque, transparent. Oh, translucent. Okay, translucent I don't have with me. I don't have any that are translucent. Let me see. I'm looking at the whole list to see which ones are, and to see if I actually have one here. Phthalo Blue. Nope, that one's transparent. So I don't have translucent, but that's one that's kind of in between the two. So when you're painting, I don't pay attention to which ones are opaque, which ones are transparent, and which ones are translucent. I use the colors that I like, and I use them in any which way I want. So there is no rule. I don't use any rules about, you know, I should use opaque only on the top layer or the bottom layer. Nothing like that. I'm just using colors that I like in the way that I like to use them, which is just mixing them up and coming up with different colors. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. So the difference between transparent and translucent is very subtle. It's a translucent is a shade lighter than transparent. So transparent, it would be even lighter than this. So here's opaque. This one's transparent. Translucent, if I had an example to show you, which unfortunately I don't, would be, you would be able to see my white even more so. So just a slight difference. Okay, lots of questions coming in. Okay, so everyone who's painting along with me, thank you. You guys are doing awesome. If it looks like mine, all craziness, then you are exactly where you need to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on quieting all this down. So let's start on that right away. Let's start with this bottom corner. I like starting somewhere in a corner. So I'm going to take some white, and I'm just going to take, I don't know, a color, a little bit of a color, and I'm going to start filling it in. So now I'm really covering up everything, but meaning my original white that's showing that I hadn't covered before. But I'm also going to save some bits and pieces of some of these colors that are already here, like some of this blue I really like. So I'm going to save a little bit of that. And okay, so calming down the chaos and the editing is what we're doing now. So right away, I'm already quieting down this corner. I'm covering up some parts. You know, this blue I like, but I don't need to have all of it showing. So I'm going to cover even more of it now to really quiet down that area. So let me dip into my white again. So I'm dipping into white, but I'm using whatever color I already had on my brush. So it's not a pure white. It's got a little bit of color in it. So moving over this way, I'm not going to go too far over. But now I'm working on Bristol paper, and now you can see this corner, it's already quieted down. So let's work on other areas. All right, so now question about golden fluids. I do have some golden fluids, but I love my Nova color, so I rarely use my golden fluids. Actually, they're drying out, so I really should get back to using them so that they don't dry out entirely and they go to waste. All right, I'm going to take some of my black that I had here and create a gray. I'm still using the same paintbrush I've been using all along, which I think is a number 4, a flat brush. Okay, question about my palette. So I am using plastic. I have a white sheet of paper underneath my plastic. And the plastic that I like to use is this, it's called Weatherall plastic sheeting. And what's important about it is that it's 4 mil, the number 4 mil, M-I-L. And you'll see a link to it in my favorite art supplies. You want the stronger plastic so that if you get the really thin one, you're just going to end up making holes in it. So I'm using the gray here, and I am quieting down this corner here. Now I don't want to quiet it down so it looks identical to this one, so I'm just kind of doing a more narrow approach here. Okay, so can you respond? All right, so I am using, sorry, I'm talking to my sister sometimes, so it may sound a little funny. I'm adding more white here. I just want to lighten up this corner. So again, I'm kind of doing a very light layer of it. And I'm saving just a little bit here and there. All right. All right, so the question is, why do I like Nova over Golden or Liquitex? I love Golden and I love Liquitex. I've used them in the past, but what I love most about Nova color paints is I love their pigmentation. I think it ranks right up there with Golden and Liquitex, although if I put them side by side, I think Golden's got a bit more pigmentation. But what I really love about Nova is that they are so affordable. And I don't worry about putting paint out. And if I was to walk away right now and let this dry, I wouldn't worry about it at all. When I'm creating large especially, I put out a lot of paint. And the last thing I want to do as an artist is to be worried about how much paint I put out and how much it costs me and how careful I have to be with it. So what I found was with the golden paints, I would put out, and you guys probably know this, you probably do this too, I put out just a tiny little bit because I'm so afraid of wasting it. With Nova, I just put out as much as I want and I don't worry about it, and I absolutely love their colors. And I think that you guys can see from the pieces that I create that their colors are outstanding. And if you purchased a piece from me, I know that one of the biggest compliments I get is that they absolutely love the pieces in person and the color and the vibrancy of the pieces. So that is why I love my Nova color paints. All right, let's go in. Got another question coming in. Okay, so harmonizing colors, there's a question about that. Unfortunately, today I'm not going to be able to go into that. I think I need to do a whole session just on harmonizing colors because there is so much to learn about that. But for right now, I'm harmonizing my warm colors and I'm harmonizing my cool colors as I go. And that just simply means I'm mixing those colors as I go. All right, so let's tackle another area. I can tackle this corner down here, but let's tackle something maybe in the middle here. So the question is, do I worry about the back of my paper getting messy with paint? No, I think it's more authentic when I go to sell this piece that it is an original and it's not a copy. So having paint on the back, I think really tells a person that it is an original piece. All right, so I mixed a few of my yellows here, and I'm creating something more of a neutral color with these yellows and whatever I had on my brush. So it could have been some of these grays here, and I'm really liking this neutral color. Question is, was I adding water to my gray when I was making gray earlier? No, I tend to paint with a very dry brush, so I don't like, if I was to put water on it, then it would be more like a watercolor. So I don't like doing that. So my brushes tend to be pretty dry when I'm painting. All right, so I'm kind of working this area here. Question is, can I reconstitute my paint colors with water to reuse later? No, I cannot. Once it's dry, and that's what I love about it. All right, so I'm kind of quieting down this area. Are you guys seeing how I'm adding in color here, and one color working my way through, but adding, let me get some more white here, adding some white to it so that it's not all identical. So I'm going to come back in. This is a little bit of a lighter color now. Right, so the question is, when I'm quieting down, I don't cover up what's underneath entirely. Correct, I don't. So I'll hold this up so you can still see a little bit of those areas underneath. I'm not putting a really heavy coat on here like this, where I'm not making it opaque. I'm leaving it so that you can sense that there's something underneath, so that kind of creates depth as you're putting this together. All right, let me move on to another color. How about some pink? And how about, oh, that's a fun pink. So there was a question about adding gray taken away from the bright, and that's taking away from the bright colors, and why. I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you elaborate a little bit, please? Do I typically scratch off between layers? Oh, yes, but I'm so busy teaching you guys that I'm forgetting things. So yes, you can come in and you can definitely, a lot of this is already dry, but you can continue to scratch through if you'd like. I feel like I've got enough texture going on that I don't have to keep doing it after my first couple of layers. Here I came in and I made some marks down here with the color that I'm using here. I'd like to do that. I'm going to go back to my kind of more of this yellow color here. I'm going to come back in. I changed the color just a little bit. And now I want to come in and let me make some marks with that same color somewhere else. So let's do, I did some there, I've got some here, maybe somewhere down in the center here. Sometimes I go right over what I've already marked. I might make some new marks. That's just moving the eye around. So I've got yellow here, and some yellow down here. All right, let me go to some red now. And I've got red here. How about if I'm going to do some red up in this corner here. And actually I've got red here. So maybe right in here, I'm going to just do some little tick marks of red. So the question is, do you quiet down only the colors you don't like, or do you cover up any color? you can cover up whatever you'd like. I cover up some of my favorite colors because it's just not working with where it's at. Sometimes I save some colors that I do like. It's going to be up to you, you know, what feels right to you. Just keep in mind that sometimes you have to cover something up to be able to move forward, even though you absolutely love that piece. All right, I've got some kind of pink going on here. I'm going to go back into this corner. This is where we did the drips. I'm sorry, I have a question coming in. Okay, the question is, do I use the other media over crayons? I'm not sure what, over the acrylic. Yeah, so my final stage is mark making, and I'll be using different mark making tools such as the Woodies, the Prismacolor. Today I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get around to using the soft pastels because we're trying to cover so much in a short period of time, and for me to create an entire painting from start to end and talking through my process takes a bit longer than normal. So I don't know that we're going to be able to add all those, but yes, you can put anything over this. Just keep in mind that, you know, if you're going to put something that's water soluble like this, if I was to come in here now and make these marks, and then I was to put a color over that, that's going to obliterate it, or it's going to move it around if it's a really soft light color. So it's okay to do that. Just know that it may not be there in that final piece if that's where you're expecting it to be. So you don't want to add too much in these stages. Now, one of the things I do like to do, that being said, is that when if I was to leave this and come back the next day, I will start my painting as if I just sat down and started painting. So I would come in here and I might take something like this and just make a whole bunch of marks on it. Because I'm not done, this is just going to add some interest to it, because I'm going to continue covering up. Here we've got, let's go with this one. This is a Neocolor 2, so I can make some marks with that. All right, well, I'm going to try to squeeze everything in because I've got questions coming in. All right, so let me get my soft pastels out. So again, soft pastels are water soluble, so if I'm to use them in this layer, I may not see them in the final. But I would just come in here and I would just make some marks with them. Probably better to use this on the final. So just adding some brighter colors with it. You guys could probably see those bright colors, I hope. But see, very chalky. I just got rid of some of that chalkiness. Now, I may not remember that I put this on, and they may get removed. But, you know, you can certainly use this at this stage as well. I'm just going to rub those in a bit. So the question is, do I paint in one direction like this, or do I turn it around and do a painting? I have learned that I like it best when it only stays in one direction and I paint it from start to end that way. I know some folks like to turn it around. I've tried doing that and I don't care for it. It just doesn't work for me, but that doesn't mean it won't work for you. Give it a try. If you like that, then by all means continue to do that. Everything comes down to, you know, what do you like, and you figure that out by experimenting and just trying different things. And so that's one of those things that I tried and I said, nope, really don't like it when I flip it around and I look at it from a different angle. All right, I'm continuing on. All right, so the question is, how do I know when I'm done, and do I ever work it? Overwork it. I'm trying to paint and talk. All right, so yes, I've been known to overwork my paintings, and well, that's just life. You know, move on. And here's an example of repetition. So I've got these in this color down here, and then I've repeated it up here in a different color. And how do I know when I'm done? I know when I'm done when I just can't figure out what more I can possibly do. And I'm not near that yet. So let me continue on here. I want to fill in this corner over here. My sister, well, she's cracking me up because she's talking in my ear, but she does not paint. I think she would like to be a budding artist, but no, she's very good at a lot of other stuff. Painting has not been at the top of her list. So if you ever see me with dog pictures in my stories on Instagram or Facebook, a lot of times those are the dogs that she is pet sitting. So she does that part-time, and she's an awesome virtual assistant, and she often helps me with my emails. She reads them over. I bounce ideas off of her, so she is a great coach in that sense for me, and she is an awesome sister. All right, so I kind of quieted down that corner. It's pretty bright. I'm looking at it on my screen here. So let's think about where else I can go with that so that it doesn't, or I can come back and I can kind of quiet that down. But I'm okay with it right now. I'm going to do some larger circles here. I don't know if I'm going to like these or not, but let's give it a try. I'm going to do one more up here, kind of next to these smaller ones, which might get obliterated if I decide I don't want them. All right, and notice I go all the way up to the page, kind of slightly off the page. That gives the eye the illusion that it continues. So try to keep things going off the page instead of all contained within, if you want to have that illusion. So the question is, can you go back in with pencils and China markers at this point? Absolutely. Like I was just showing you, I was making some marks, scribbling in. It's very subtle. I can see it up close, probably hard to see on the camera. So you can do that at this stage. You just want to make sure that your page is pretty dry so that those marks show up. Okay, so let me look at this. Let's figure out where we're at. So I'm looking at it and I'm trying to figure out, do I have some kind of composition going on? There's still a lot of craziness. Like this whole area here I have not addressed yet because I can see a lot of my original paints from before, from my earlier layers. This down here, this area I haven't addressed yet. This area I think needs some more work in here. So I've got some areas to work on. So I'm going to move to this area next, and I'm going to clean off my brush. And I've decided I want to make that more white. So I cleaned off my brush, but there's still a little bit of yellow on my brush. So I'm going to come in here. All right, so question about sealing. Yes, I seal all my artwork when it's done, and it has thoroughly dried for, could be several days to a week or so, depending on how large the painting is and how much paint is on it. And my favorite product for varnishing is Liquitex, and I use all three finishes. So sometimes I might use a matte finish, especially on my really large pieces if I don't want them to be too shiny. Sometimes I'll use a satin, and other times I will use a gloss. For example, on my small pieces I tend to use gloss because I really want the colors to pop a lot. So I use all three. All right, so I'm just kind of working my way down here. I want to blend that in a little bit more. So I've got a lot of yellow going on there. I'm going to go back to my pinks. Yep. Okay, so I want to add some more pink through here. Let me add a little bit. All right, so the question is, if you're looking at your painting and you're feeling stuck and you don't know where to go next, I would say take one section, kind of like what I had talked about, you know, like I know I've got this area that I haven't tackled yet. So I want to tackle that area. So kind of tackle one area at a time. And I know it can be overwhelming when you look at the whole piece, but try to zoom in on just one area and say, okay, what can I do in this one area? And work that one area. And then when you're done with that area, look at your piece again, and where does your eye go? Maybe your eye goes to an area where it just doesn't look right. It doesn't feel done, or it feels chaotic. And then work that area next and figure out, okay, let me add some more color here, or let me add some mark making to it. I'm going to add some circles here. Speaking of mark making, we'll do a few little circles there. So I tend to, you know, I get stuck too. So I will look at the whole thing and say, okay, well, where does my eye go, and where do I feel like I need to work, what needs work next? All right, I'm going to go over to, I want to do some of my cool colors here, which I'm kind of mixing colors. This is kind of a green, so let's see. This part here doesn't quite feel done for me, so I'm going to come in here, add some green. Somebody's commenting that they scratched into their wet paint with a white China marker and they love it. So that's a great example of experimenting. You know, have some fun with it, and you'll be surprised how many times you do something and you say, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that, and I really love that, and I should do that more often. All right, so I'm looking for more marks to make over here. My brush is really dry because I'm trying to use up this gray that I've got here. All right, so slowly starting to come together. There's more work to be done here. In terms of, you know, I think there's some more areas through here that I want to make more cohesive, and doing that by using more of the same colors that I've got going. So I like this kind of grayish color. Let's see if I can remake that gray. I'm looking for my black over here. And I'm going to just, the smallest dip of black, because you guys know it doesn't take much black to make a dark color. And then I'm just grabbing some of this white over here that's also mixed in with some pinks. And that's an example of how I am harmonizing these colors. All right, so I'm going to come in here, and I want to add some of that gray through here. Gray is a great neutral, and it really will make your other colors pop if you use neutrals in your paintings. So don't be afraid to throw in a neutral and not have everything the same bright color. All right, so now I like that better through there. It's kind of quieted down that area even more. And let's come across here. I think I want to add. So the question is, do I ever go back with a cool color if I'm ending with warm? Yes, sometimes I will, just to maybe pop out some colors that I feel like were pushed back too far. So there are no rules, you know. I'll keep going back and forth with all my colors until I'm happy with what I see. All right, so now I've kind of quieted down that area in the middle there. All right, so now, let me see, I'm going to make some lines here. So again, my mark making is throughout. Okay. All right, so I realize that we are at 1 o'clock Pacific time now. Because we started late, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going probably for another 25 to 30 minutes. If you can't stay on, I totally understand. And again, I apologize for all the technical issues we had in the beginning there. The recording will be available tomorrow, so you'll be able to watch the whole thing from start to end. But if you can stick around, please stick around. We're going to do a little bit more here, and I'm going to finish this up with some mark making. I go back into my pink, and so here's an example where I just looked up here and I felt like this pink really didn't, it stuck out a little bit too much compared to my other pinks. So I just covered that up a little bit. And this red, I don't know, I'm not too crazy about it. I'm going to add some pink to that too. But I didn't cover it entirely. I let a little bit of that red show through underneath. So let's see. I'm looking at this, trying to figure out where I want to go. I don't have some really light colors. I've got a lot of grays through here, some gray up here. I want to introduce some white. I've got kind of white here. It's kind of a pinkish white. So maybe I'm going to go back over that with more white and really lighten up that area. So putting down some more gesso, my gesso for my white. And I've already got a little bit of color on this brush, which happens to be pink again, which is okay. And I'm just going to lighten up this corner a bit more. I'd like to have some light areas and some dark areas. So my dark areas being these blues are darker, a little bit of this black showing through over here. And now I've got this white. I'm going to come up a little bit higher over here. Okay, so I kind of like that, but now I want to balance that. Let's bring it over here somewhere. So I'm going to bring it in here. So much for all that great yellow that I loved earlier, right? It's getting covered up now, and that's okay. I still got a little bit of it showing through. But that's what happens as you start to work through it. You're going to start covering up what's not working. All right, so I like that I've got this balance of white here and white here, so that it's not all in the same values of being more mid-tone. So there's more extremes. I like that I've got these blues. Let's see what else I can do here. I'm dipping into white again. I feel like I need to bring it in just somewhere else here. Okay, so there was a comment, and it was a pretty long one. Thank you, Judy. So yes, so my initial mark making was there so that I can pick and choose what I wanted to save. So like these blues, you guys remember I put those down. I saved those. These magenta colors, I decided I'm going to save those. So as I work through my layers, I get to pick and choose what am I going to keep and what am I going to cover up. And that's the purpose of why I like to build up these layers and create interest that way by being able to make a variety of different marks and then later choosing what I really want to keep and what I think is going to work. All right, so We've got, kind of feel like I'm getting kind of close to the end, where we can do some mark making, because I want to make sure I have time for that. So would I call this completely done? I would say I'm probably like 90% done. I would probably want to do just a little bit more in a few areas. But for the sake of time, I want to be sure that I spend a little time with you doing one more part of my process, and that is the mark making. And then I want to make sure that I've got enough time in there also to answer some more questions for you. So let's do this. Let's okay, so question about gel pens for my final. I'll show you what I like to use in my final. Gel pens is not one of them. And of course, I'm not ready to put down my brush, so I'm going to just spend just a couple of more minutes. I like the way my eye is carrying through with this yellow here coming all the way down this way. And it's not identical to this yellow color, so it's a little bit different. What I would like to do, though, is get a little bit more green. So I've come over here with the yellow that I had on my brush, and I had a tiny bit of blue left over here. And I'm feeling this need to have some green come in. I'm going to cover up some of this yellow down here so that the eye can move down this way. So I covered up those yellows here because I felt like the eye came down this way and then kind of went off to the side. And let's take the rigger, since we're kind of at the end here, and so the rigger that I showed you guys earlier is a brush with a very long bristle on it, and it allows you to kind of, you know, almost write with it. I think they also call this a script brush, and I did some very light colored, you could barely see these greens through here. Let's see, I'm going to do some more lines. How about some, these are a bit lighter. Making some lines through here. Hoping you can see those. Can you see those? All right. Okay, and so let me dip it into white. And I'm going to add a little more water. So with the rigger, of course, you want to add enough water to get it to move around easily. I'm going to do some more circles because this makes some really good circles. How about right in here? Ooh, those are some nice thick circles. So I'm almost starting my finishing process where I'm adding interest by adding circles and lines. I'll add some dots in as well. And I like to put them, when I'm putting down marks, I like to put them all together, kind of clump them together, almost like, you know, when you're looking at flowers, you know, that are, even gardens that are put together, you've got, as opposed to out in the wild, you've got them in groups. And so I kind of think of these, you know, like a grouping of flowers, and that's why I like to group things together instead of having like one here, one here, one here. They don't relate to each other. Just like I have this yellow, 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 they relate to each other because they're similar in size and shape. They're much larger than anything else I have going on. And so same thing with these little ones here. Let me go in, actually let me do more of a pinkish color now. Add a little more. All right, I'm going to do some more. Let's do some up here. I'm just going to do some, they're not quite dots, they're kind of like little lines, but that works too. I guess it's just the way I'm holding my brush. So I've got a bunch of lines there. And sometimes if I feel like that's too bright, I might just come in and just use my rag to soften it out a bit, and I like that even more now. Actually, it's got an interesting look to it now. It kind of emptied out some of the areas there. So I like that even better. All right, let's see. I want to do some more lines. Let's do some, about right in here. And again, I'm not crazy about, you know, I think it's the color I don't like. I'm not really liking, I wanted a softer pink. Let me try to come back in here. All right, I'm kind of liking that pink better. But again, I'd like to just come in and lift that up a little bit and soften it up. Okay, now I'm feeling better. I'm liking that I've got some of these other marks. Maybe that's what it was missing, where I was feeling like it needed just a little bit more. So I came in and I just did some marks with my script brush. I've got this one here. I'm going to do just a tiny bit more. I've got a little bit of green going on here and there, and I think I want to come up here. What do I want to do up here? I've already got these lines. Maybe I'll just do something like this, right over what I had. All right, I'm good with that. These are smaller than these. These are much larger, and then these are a lot thinner. I feel like I should have some over here. How about right here? Where is that green? And I like to do them in all different sizes so that they're not all always the same size. Okay, now I'm feeling like it's really coming together more so. All right, I'm going to hit this with the dryer, and then let's talk about mark making at the very end. Okay, that did not take much. Okay, let's do some mark making here. I'm going to start with my pencil. Just like when I start at the beginning and I like to do my loose mark making, when I do my final stage, I like to always start with my pencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making marks. So I've got these circles here. I think I'm just going to come in, I'm going to circle my circles. But I'm not going to perfectly circle them. I'm kind of like slightly off. And that just adds more interest if they're not perfectly circled around the existing ones. And then I'm going to go up and off a little bit further. So there's my circles there. And then if I don't want that to be that dark, I've got my eraser, which I need to clean off a little bit so it's not so smudged. Just clean that off on my apron. And then I like to come in and just lightly erase. I'm going to do it both directions so that it doesn't have that smeared look. And I'm liking that. Now it's a little bit softer and it's not quite as noticeable. All right, so going back to my pencil, let's do some more mark making. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to draw some lines because I like fence lines, especially broken fences that are falling down. So notice how my fence is kind of falling down. So, and again, I feel like that's a little bit too dark. Maybe I should use, lighter marks, but what I like to do is I just like to come in with my eraser and just very lightly erase a little bit of it. All right, so we've got that now. We've got some lines here in addition to our circles down here. And then I always do things in threes. So I'm going to do, how about some little circles? So I'm going to just come up here. I'm going to do a bunch of little tiny circles. All right. Okay. And there's my bunch of little tiny circles there. All right, so we've got it in 3 different places. I'm not even going to erase that one. I think that one is good like that. All right, I've got a China marker here, a yellow one. I've also got a black one. Where's my black one? So the question was how to peel it back. It's always very tricky because, and don't use an X-Acto knife like I did once and I cut my finger. What you want to do is you just want to pull on the string, pull it down maybe like a ½ inch, and then peel it back. And what you're going to do, actually I went the wrong way. Let's peel it back the right way. Okay, so when you start peeling it, pull downward towards you. I think that's kind of hard to see. Hold on. Okay, can you see that better? Pull it towards you, not up this way. If you pull up this way, you're going to rip it off. You want to pull it downward and towards you, and spin as you go. So just spin it around, as opposed to doing this. Sometimes it can rip, so I like to just spin it in my hand like this. And I'm just gently pulling it down towards me. And you just keep going. And you don't want to take off too much, because if you do, it's going to end up breaking. So you just want a little bit at a time. All right, so that's how to peel that back. Here's my black. I like coming in with black not only to make marks, but here's a little bit of black showing through from before. I like to come in and just darken that up just a tiny bit more, just so I have little pops of black. And you can then rub that in with your finger to give it more of a painterly look. Let's see. So I'm just going to fill in a few places where I already had black. Now I can certainly, this one's already pretty dark. It probably doesn't need darkening anymore. But I love having these little tiny punches of black showing through. So if you don't think you've got enough black showing through, at the end, add some more with your China marker, or you can also use a Stabilo if you want to do that. You can use a Prismacolor pencil. Any one of these is going to work. The China marker, again, is not water soluble, so that means those marks will stay in place. But because we're going to be doing such a variety of different marks, you're probably going to want to spray this at the very end. And I'll talk about a fixative spray. All right, so here I've got my Stabilo Woody, which in a pink. I've got pink going on here. So I'm just going to come in and make some more marks with it. Right over some areas. These circles are a bit larger than these circles, but not as big as these. So I'm trying to do a variety of different sizes. All right, so that I can come in and I can make some smaller tick marks. These aren't going to show so much. I've already got a lot of pink going on over here. Let's go to something else. Let's go with, I always like going with something a little bit lighter. So this is a Woody again, but it's a bit lighter in color. And sometimes I even like to just color in with it. So I could create some shapes just by doing some filling in. Okay, and now we've got kind of this line of flowers here going on. Let's see, I can come up here. I've got circles, circles, circles. Maybe I'll just do some tick marks. These are going to be hard to see because some of them are going one color on top of another, but it's very subtle. If you can see it here. So you see it here, and then there's a white, kind of more of a white background here, but it's very subtle transition. I really like that, the way it goes from one area to another. Okay, so you can do that. You can certainly take your Neocolor 2s, and I've already got kind of this color here, so I'm just going to color it in a little bit more. You know, sometimes if I have a color I don't care about, I might just color it in. Or I've got these guys, I can circle them or not. I can rub that out a bit if I don't entirely like it. The great thing is you can also come in and just erase it. So even if you're using a crayon or let's see, or any one of the, or Prismacolor pencils, you know, these can be erased. So if I make this mark here, and I can come in and I can just take it out. So don't be afraid to experiment with mark making at the very end. Just have your eraser on hand so that you can just erase something that you don't like. Actually, I like that orange right there, so I'm going to come back in and put that in. And very similar to these lines up here, which means that I'm going to soften these out even more so it doesn't compete with those. All right, I do like that orange. Let's see what else. Okay, so going back to let's do these. All right, so I did some orange. I really like that orange that I did there. I'm going to do some up here. So I'm going to grab my. These are the pastel colors. Where'd my box go? I had a box. Oh, there it is. All right, so these are the soft pastels, and they're on my favorite art supplies. And I'm going to do some lines over here. Just 3 of them. Maybe one off the page. I like that. Ooh, I like that. See how bright that is? And who was that? Judy, you're asking about what pencil I was using. I'm not sure. Maybe that was my Prismacolor pencil. Maybe put a comment in there one more time. The eraser is just a regular eraser. Nothing special about it. You could tell. The burgundy. What was the burgundy that I used? Let me think. Anybody out there know which burgundy I used? I don't recall now. Oh, Prismacolor. Okay. Oh, or the Neo Color too. This one. It was either sitting next to the red thing. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Then it was my Neo Color 2, which would be this. All right, so going back to my chalk pastel. Okay, notice how bright that is. Isn't that lovely, how bright that color is? And that's why I like using these. And this definitely will need to be sprayed. And then I want to bring it in. Do I want to leave it there? No, I'm good. I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to bring in another. I'm not going to add it somewhere else. Let's see. I really like this color. Oh, I was using Neo Color 2. My Neo Color 1s are still in the package. I didn't bring those out. Okay, so let's see. What other mark making can we do here? Oh, I've got a white China marker. I love my white China marker. Let's see. Let's come in here with bit more subtle. I'm doing white on white background, so very subtle there. But let me do, trying to think where. Oh, and when I'm doing this final mark making, I am holding it like a pen or a pencil, as opposed to keeping it loose back here, because I'm intentionally drawing or filling in. So I'm holding it so that it doesn't fall out of my hand. Okay, so I'm kind of making those dark. I want to do something over here. Maybe some circles again. And even with this, I like to rub them out a bit so they're a bit softer. All right, just a little bit of mark making there. So like I said, there are so many tools. You know, you can get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm adding just way too much because there's so many options out there. This is my Sharpie in the yellow, which I really like. So of course here I am trying to add it in somewhere. Maybe brighten up these yellows that I already had, little pieces of it here. Okay, so it's really, you know, there's so much to choose from, so much to do. pick and choose what you want to do. Each time you might do something a little bit different. My absolute favorite Prismacolor, which is this teal, which I need to add in somewhere. So I always do this at the end. Even if it's not a teal painting, there's a little bit of teal somewhere in there. There we go. Now I got my teal in there, especially next to the pink. Always looks good there. Okay, so that, and then when I am completely done, I sign it. So I find one of my corners to sign it, and I sign in pencil. So I'm going to put my signature here. And on the back, I will come up with a title and other information. So for example here, I titled this one My Oasis. And I put my signature, I put the date, so March 2020. I put the location, this was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And then I put my website, bettykrausart.com. So that's how I like to finish each piece. After I sign it, and I have a title for it, I finish it up with all this information on the back. All right, so, wow, I'm really liking this. Now that I looked away for a moment, and here's my other one. So I'm glad I finished it in more of the reds. You guys probably do this too. It's good to walk away from your piece and then look at it. I've been staring at it for so long. When I looked away to look at this one, I came back and I just immediately said, wow, I really like the way it came together. And here it is next to one of the other darker colors. So this way. So much brighter, and that's what I was hoping to get, is more the warm colors and just having some of the cool colors pop through. All right, folks, what questions can I answer for you that I haven't already answered? Question, why pencil? Not sure, you mean like why do I use pencil? Or maybe you can elaborate on the question. Why do I sign in pencil? Because sometimes I do a crappy job of signing, and I find that if I do it in pencil, I can erase it and redo it. So, let me talk about how I'm going to finish this off. So, first thing would be, this one's empty, but this is called Workable Fixative. And it protects pencil, pastel, and chalk drawings, prevents smudging and wrinkling, allows easy rework, so you can work right on top of it if you want to continue working. It's acid-free, archival safe. So I love using this spray first, just one light spraying, and that'll secure everything. And then when I go to varnish, here's one of my favorites, Liquitex High Gloss. So this would get a high gloss varnish, so that those colors would really pop. Because it's such a small piece, I really like the colors to stand out a lot. So this is the varnish that I like to use. And that's also in my favorite art supply list. All right, any other questions? Okay, so briefly talk about composition. There's a lot of different compositions you can be doing. This one, and the person who said that, who was that? Amy. Okay, Amy. So on this particular one, the composition is really an all-over composition. Where my eye goes the most is really these larger circles. These three might be competing with that, so I'm going to have to think about that. Do I take that out, or do I leave it in? You know, I've got these up here as well. I think I'm going to leave them in. I'm okay with it. But the composition here, again, you can think about doing something that stands out more. So here, these reds definitely stand out, as does these here. They almost compete. But the reds are a little bit larger in size, and I've quieted down a lot of the rest of the area in similar colors. This one here, again, an all-over composition, quieter kind of in some of the areas, but I was using color to kind of pull it together, kind of using this what color would this be? Oh, my mind just went blank. Mustardy color. you know, on this one, I have to say, there isn't like one thing that really captures my eye immediately, but the mustards do. A little bit of this blue coming through here. So think about in terms of, you know, how can you get your eye to move through the piece from top to bottom, from side to side. So for me on this one, it's these bluish colors up here capture my eye, even these darker areas. And then coming off the sides are these more mustardy colors where my eye is drawn to those. So on this one, again, going back to, you know, when I come back and look at it, these yellows are really capturing me because they're larger than some of these other elements. So you want to work on quieting down areas so that some areas stand out more than others. And as you work towards the end, you might need to come back in and make those more obvious like I did here. This was at the very end that I came back in with this yellow after I had done everything else. All right, another question? Okay, so oil pastels, the question about oil pastels. In the beginning I said I don't like to use them because they take too long to dry. So if I was to use oil pastels on these beginnings layers and I put paint over it, the paint would not cover it because the oil is oily and it doesn't mix with water, which acrylics are water-based. So they would constantly be showing and revealing themselves. If you want to use pastels, oil pastels, I would recommend using them in the final layer. Okay, so if you're working on a piece and you're getting frustrated because it's not coming together, I would recommend that you continue adding some color to that. Maybe add a little bit more paint to it, maybe less. But it's really about experimenting and trying to figure out, you know, what works and what doesn't work. For me, this has been years, at least 2+ years of doing this particular style of trying to figure out what I like and what I don't like. So I really encourage a lot of experimenting. The weight of the Bristol paper, it's not very heavy at all. And as you've noticed, it's not buckling like it was earlier. The weight is 100 pounds. So, and it's flattened out quite a bit as I added more paint to it. All right, so what I'd like to do is I would really like to wrap it up at this point. And please know that I've got a video that I'll be sending out tomorrow. You can rewatch that as much as you'd like. I will include my link to my list of favorite products. I'll also include the paint colors that I used today, along with the number, so that if you want to order those, you can order those. What else? What else was I supposed to provide for you guys? I think that was everything. Question coming in. Okay, so somebody's asking, now that this is done, how would this be presented? So when I sell them as is, but if I was doing a show, which I have done in the past, I would mat these, and then I would just put them in a cello sleeve so that people can take them home and pick out their own frame. But I've also framed them myself for shows. So doing a combination of the two. But it's important that you do a mat around it so that the artwork itself doesn't get stuck to the glass. The other option would be to mount it onto wood. So mounting it onto cradled wood would be another way to go. That's another step to take, but that would certainly be another option, and then you don't have to put it under glass. Then you can just varnish the whole thing, including the wood sides. All right. Sure, if you guys want to hold up your artwork to your, whoops, where am I here? To your camera, we can look and see what you guys made. Oh, so if you joined me late, the other two pieces of paper were just practicing mark making on just printer paper, just loosening up. Okay, so the spray and the varnish, somebody's asking if I can show you how I use that. I can't do that. I can't spray inside. That's something I would prefer to do outside. However, I've got videos on my YouTube channel on how I do that, so I will include a link in the email tomorrow so that you can go to my YouTube channel and watch how I varnish art on paper. Have I used Blair fixative? I'm not familiar with Blair fixative, so I can't comment on that. I've used the workable fixative, which I like, and I've also used just a finishing, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's see. Oh, I didn't bring one with me, but just a spray varnish can be used as well if you don't want to use the liquid varnish. I do not use metallics in my work. I've seen other people do it and it looks fabulous. Experiment and see if you like it. Okay, and then last question here is how will you know what other classes I provide? If you're on my email list, which you are now because you are here today, then you will receive an email from me. I plan to do another one probably in a couple of months. So look for future emails. If you're following me on social media, I always post there. But if you're on my email list, you're going to always get the best price and you'll be the first to know. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up here. If you have any other questions that I didn't answer or that we accidentally missed, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Thank you again. I am so grateful for having all of you guys here today joining me. I know we've got a lot of craziness going on in this world today, so I hope that today has given you a little bit of peace and calm, and I hope that I have showed you some ways to loosen up in the beginning, but also some techniques on painting that you can bring to your own painting in your own style and have fun with that. All right, you guys, and thank you to my sister who is absolutely fabulous and who has helped me through this whole process today. All right, folks, thank you, and have a fabulous weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.